Solving quadratic equations by completing the square. Our first example, we have the quadratic equation x squared plus 8x minus 20 equal to 0. To complete the square, we must first move the 20 to the other side of the equation. So we'll look like this: x squared plus 8x equal to positive 20. Now I left a little space because we're going to be completing the square and putting two values in these two blanks. To obtain these two values, we must take our 8, take half of it to give us 4, and then square to give us our new value, which is 16. This part is the completing the square. So from here, we need to factor the x squared plus 8x plus 16 and then simplify 20 plus 16. So to factor the trinomial, 4 times 4 gives you 16 and also adds to give you 8. So our expression will say x plus 4, x plus 4 equal to 36. But since we have two of the same factors, we were just going to write them as x plus 4 squared equal to 36. Now at this stage, we're going to now solve by taking the square root. To take the square root, we must square root x plus 4 squared and 36. We're going to be left with x plus 4 equal to positive 6. But since this is a quadratic equation, we must have two answers. So we're also going to have x plus 4 equal to negative 6. So we have these two linear equations, and we're going to solve for our two values of x. So the first one, we're going to subtract 4 to the 6 and get x equal 2. And the second one, we're going to also subtract 4 to negative 6 and get x equals negative 10. So our two final answers for this quadratic equation is 2 and negative 10. Example 2, x squared plus 6x plus 1 equals 0. We're going to complete the square. If you remember from the last example, our first step is to move our constant term to the other side of the equation. So it's going to look like this: x squared plus 6x. We'll go ahead and put a plus blank since we know something's going to go there, equal to negative 1 plus blank. Now, to get the value that goes in our blanks, we must take our linear term 6, take half of it to give us 3, then square 3 to give us 9. So we have plus 9, then plus 9. So then we'll factor the trinomial and simplify the side of the equation. So what two numbers multiply to give you 9 to add to give you 6? 3 and 3. X squared plus 6x plus 9 is a perfect square trinomial since 3 and 3 will give you 9 and 3 and 3 will give you 6. So x plus 3 equals to 8. But remember, like last time, we're not going to write it this way. We're going to write it as x plus 3 to the second power equal to 8. So now we're going to solve this equation by taking the square root. Square root all of that, square root the 8. The purpose of square rooting x plus 3 squared is to get rid of the 2. So now we're left with x plus 3 equal to, well, radical 8 simplifies to be 4 and 2, 2 and 2. It's going to be 2 radical 2. But just like last time, we have x plus 3 equal to positive 2 radical 2. We're also going to have x plus 3 equal to negative 2 radical 2. So when we solve this equation, we're going to subtract 3 to both sides. Now we do not actually subtract 3 to 2 radical 2 since they are not the same term, so we're going to be left with negative 3 plus 2 radical 2. And for this one, we're going to be left with subtracting 3, so we're going to be left with x equals negative 3 minus 2 radical 2. We can leave the answers separate like this, or we can write them together. And if you write them together, it will say negative 3 plus and minus 2 radical 2. Our last example here, it looks a little different because our terms are not all on the same side of the equation. So that means we're going to have to rearrange our quadratic equation to begin completing the square. So it's going to say x squared negative 4x plus blank equals to negative 56 plus blank. So basically we took the 56 and the 4x and swapped places. But by doing that, it changed the signs. So now we have to complete the square. So take half of 4. Don't worry about the negative sign. Just take half of 4 and then square our number to give us 4. Add 4, add 4. So now we have x squared minus 4x plus 4. We have negative 56 plus 4 over here. So now let's factor 4. What two numbers multiply to give you 4? To add to give you negative 4. You have 2 and 2. And then so we have x minus 2 equal to negative 52. Just like last time, we are not going to leave x minus 2 and x minus 2 like that. It's going to say x minus 2 squared then equal to negative 52. So now we got to square root both sides of the equation. Square root x minus 2 squared and square root negative 52. So when we square root x minus 2 squared, we're left with just x minus 2. But when we square root negative 52, that simplifies to be 2i radical 13. So we can just use our calculator for that or use the factoring tree. So we have 2i, don't forget the I, radical 13. And we have x minus 2 equal to negative 2i radical 13. So now when we solve the equation, we're going to add 2 to both sides. Again, we're not actually adding 2 since they are not the same term, the 2i radical 3. So we get 2 plus 2i radical 13. The second one, we're going to add 2, and this one we're going to get x equals positive 2 minus 2i radical 13. So our final answer we can just leave as 2 plus or minus 2i radical 13. Do not forget that, with this negative 52 in our radical, we had a negative sign. So that means we have an imaginary number, and we must use I to represent that. So that is part of our answer. And again, do not forget that we have 2 answers. So we got to have our plus or minus in our answer.